Hello and welcome back, Heir of Carthage here, yes, with another State of the Faction video, and today we are jumping into our very first faction in Total War Warhammer 2. We've covered all the Game 1 factions, and it is the High Elves, folks. Interesting, they didn't actually have just their own standalone cinematic trailer. The other factions did, so what we're seeing here is the announced trailer for Total War Warhammer 2 that we got to see in March, the very end of March 2017. And then later that fall, in the end of September, we were treated to the release of Total War Warhammer 2. There were 4 base game factions that it came with: the High Elves, the Dark Elves, the Lizardmen, and the Skaven. But of course, CA doesn't really want us to believe that the Skaven exist. All right, the High Elves. So the Aesir are probably one of my favorite factions just from a preference standpoint. I've played more of their campaign along with Dawi than I have anything else in the game. I don't know why, I've just always really liked their aesthetic. It's very regal, it's a very pleasing color palette, they have very interesting units, and it's probably because they have some similarities to the elves that we see in Lord of the Rings that I really find myself drawn to the High Elf faction. Now, they launched with Tyrion and Teclis as the 2 playable legendary lords, the brothers, and then eventually we were treated to 4 more between DLC and free content. And we're going to take a look at all of those today and see how they stack up. Are they ready for Game 3? Are the High Elves in a good position? There was certainly a time during Warhammer 2 where a lot of people felt like the High Elves were missing some content, specifically in their roster, like that they didn't have enough lords, or that their roster was missing some different key areas that was making them kind of fall behind as we received more and more content for Game 2. But let's go take a look. How did they fare? Are they ready for Game 3? Let's go. All right, folks, let's start jumping into the Aesir here. Here are the High Elves, and they're going to have a whopping 6 legendary lords, which is going to blow out anything we've seen up to this point. But they're not the only Game 2 faction in that position, so it's not exactly something unique to them. But rather good to see that CA is deciding that, you know, as they go along with these games, they're going to put more and more content in. And honestly, in the end, I mean, for a player who doesn't mind buying DLC and keeping up with it, it's great. It's going to expand what you have to play and give you more there to play with. So let's take a look at the High Elves. Now, as a faction, we're going to jump over to the campaign map here shortly and take a look at unique mechanics that are available to the High Elves, and we'll show those, so I won't really go through those a ton. Let's just talk about start positions, I think, mostly here. And someone told me how to pronounce this. Iatane, I can't remember how to pronounce this. It used to just be High Elves, but they gave Tyrion his own faction, Etane, yeah, whatever. Someone will fix it for me in the comments. I forget how to pronounce it, but it's led by Tyrion, and they start in the city that holds this, or sorry, in Lothern, in the province that's going to hold the same name. So they get to hold the High Elf capital. It's a fun starting position. Honestly, Tyrion is who I usually recommend for anybody who's new to the game. So let's say that you're looking at this and you're a player who's new and you're just trying to learn a faction. Tyrion is actually a pretty good place to start in Warhammer 2 because the High Elves are a pretty understandable faction and he's got a pretty safe starting position. Now, his brother Teclis starts on the volcanic islands outside of Lustria, has a much more interesting Mortal Empire start, in my opinion. He's going to be starting around a lot of Vampire Coast, Skaven, and a lot of angry Lizardmen. He's going to have plenty of things to fight against early on. And Teclis is a very interesting start, very interesting lord in general, but of course that discussion kind of falls more into the roster, and we'll take that later. I did forget to, let's go back to Tyrion just real quick. As far as lord effects, he has an upkeep reduction on spears, Silverin Guard, Rangers, Archers, and Silver Helms, so kind of an odd combination of units, but he gets extra recruit rank for Lothern's Sea Guard as well. So those are kind of his focuses, whereas Teclis and his focus is going to be on Winds of Magic, which a plus 30 to the reserve is a lot, and he has a bound spell of Fireball. You can see that up here, as far as faction effects, he does have a recruitment reduction for Swordmasters and Phoenix Guard, which is really, or sorry, Phoenix units. I don't know if that actually applies to Phoenix Guards or just Phoenix units, but interesting stuff. So that's Teclis. Tyrion is the melee variant. Teclis is going to be your mage option. And then another mage option is Alarielle the Radiant. She starts a little further north than Tyrion in Avalorn at the Gaian Vale, and is a really interesting combination because with Alarielle, you're going to get this mixture of Wood Elves and High Elves. It is really fun to play, and to this day, I think Alarielle is probably one of my favorite Legendary Lords to play in Warhammer 2 because I just kind of have this affinity towards the High Elves. Just, I like the way they look, and then I think Alarielle offers probably one of the most interesting play styles amongst them. And if we take a look at what she specializes in, it's basically there's lingering bonuses in regions she visits. She gets weaker as chaos grows stronger, so you got to control that chaos. And then she has extra missile strength for Sisters of Avalorn and Handmaiden units, which is pretty cool. She has extra capacity as a faction for Handmaidens, and Handmaidens are really fun units in my opinion. And then she's got some invocation specialties. I'm not going to go through those specifically, but anyway, another unique start. So good one in Avalorn. You get to fight a lot of Dark Elves early. Fun start. Alith Anar, the Shadow King, added as a free unit to all who owned the base game. This was a cool add. He has a Nagaron start. He actually starts over on the Black Coast and is the only archer lord that we get for the High Elves, which is interesting for being such a archery-based faction. And that's exactly what he does. He buffs other archers. He plays as a missile lord. He's quite fun to play. He gets to start around a bunch of Skaven and Druchii, and it's a very aggressive start if you're interested in such thing as the High Elves. And honestly, his unique units are really cool too. The Shadow Walkers and Shadow Warriors are really neat hybrid archer units and make his campaign really enjoyable if you're just going with the Archer Death Ball, which is really fun because remember that he's going to improve the missile reload, I think, and damage of nearby units. So he's a very nice unit to buff that kind of stuff. He gets extra campaign movement range in the faction and a special invocation that is unique to them from the other High Elves as well. And it says eliminating characters that are marked for death grants various rewards. This is kind of a unique mechanic that their faction gets. Increased ambush chance because, they kind of operate in the shadows. And then he gets a huge upkeep reduction on those special units I mentioned, the Shadow Walkers and Shadow Warriors. So again, another unique start and slightly different mechanics too. Then we get Eltharion. Eltharion is another favorite of mine. I think if I had, I don't know. It's honestly, the High Elves have 3 lords in my opinion that are really, really fun to play. It's going to be Alarielle, Eltharion, and Imrik. It's a pretty tough call. And that doesn't mean the other ones suck. The other ones are actually pretty fun. So I don't know. In general, the High Elves rank really high for me. All right, so Eltharion starts a little bit different position here in Mortal Empires. He starts near the Badlands, and he is basically the Batman of the High Elves. He has a special jail mechanic where he can capture characters and put them in his prison at Tor of Rest. It's really entertaining, and if you love seeing your enemies humiliated one by one over and over again, then you should definitely pick Eltharion, and he's going to make that really fun. It's the dungeon at Athel Tamara. So it's really, really good. He has a Mists of Rest, which is like a cloaking thing, and his allies in Defensive Shroud makes it harder for enemies to come in. Though you do have very big diplomatic problems with the Greenskins. They're all going to hate you, and considering that you start near the Badlands, good luck with that. He is immune to Wasteland Attrition, though, which is going to make things more interesting, and he gets a leadership buff for Spears and Rangers in his army. He gets access to special units as well. That come through the Athel Tamarha fortress and stuff that you can rebuild as a special mechanic. Really, really quite fun. I like the special units that he has to offer. I think they're a lot of fun, and I think you would enjoy them. And if you look here too, his whole army causes fear when fighting against the Greenskins, though I'm sure the Greenskins would disagree that this is actually the case. Yeah, there's Eltharion, so another unique start. And then speaking of another unique start, we got Imrik here, another free LC Lord. And Imrik is insane. Like, he is quite possibly one of the most powerful lords, just because once you start unlocking dragons, I mean, he has doom stacks like no one's business. He is very good in melee. He has this interesting start, though, way out here in the Shadowlands, on the Plain of Bones near Nobbler country, which, of course, is going to become more relevant here coming up with the release of the Nobblers in the Ogre faction in Game 3. But he starts near the Dragon Isle, so there's Druchii, there's Tomb Kings and some vampires nearby, there's Lizardmen not far away, there's Dwarves nearby, there's Greenskins nearby. There is a plethora of factions out here in this area, many of which don't want you there. And boy, it's really neat. His dragon taming mechanic is quite awesome, and honestly might be better than the Eltharion mechanic, and he was the one that you actually paid for when you went in. And as you can see here, he gets extra campaign movement range and a big reduction in upkeep for dragons and dragon princes, which is his focus. And it's just really neat. He's immune to desert and mountain attrition, so fun lord here. Huge focus on melee doom stacks because of the way he's good with dragons and dragon princes. Again, Imrik and Eltharion are good stuff, and so is Alarielle, in my opinion. So you got 6 lords here. I think all of them are great, and they're a lot of fun. But let's go load in and take a look at, let's say, the mechanics for Teclis, Tyrion, and Alarielle versus the DLC. This is going to take a bit. So if you all are wanting to just kind of get to the end, you can skip ahead if you want, but I feel like we've got to cover this so that we can get a good look at the High Elves. Also, quickly before we load up, this is the Vortex starts, and all 6 of these lords are in the Vortex campaign. All 6 lords still maintain a unique start position as well. Some slightly different, like for instance, Eltharion actually starts on the east side of Ulthuan in that campaign, so it's a little different in the Vortex, but great starts all around for the High Elves. All right, I've loaded up a Tyrion campaign here in Mortal Empire so we can take a look at the mechanics that are available. CA added several things that should make things a little spicier for the High Elves, and this was done over time. Originally, they just had this influence, which was their special thing, and essentially, you can get intrigue at the court. You take this influence, you can use it to tweak relations between different factions. So the High Elves, basically using their ancient knowledge and influence, you're able to either improve or make worse relations between different factions. And it was supposed to be a way for you to play a little bit of intrigue. And honestly, if you're like a High Elf purist type of player, you can use this to try and ensure that, you know, the High Elves will quit fighting each other, and you can try and confederate them all, which is, I've never managed to accomplish it. I swear these idiots over here at Safari, no matter how much influence you have, you just can't get through their thick skulls. They won't participate. So in any case, you got Safari and the others that you can try and get all together, and it's fun to kind of Pokemon all the different High Elf factions. Got to collect them all, you know. And then there is the Sword of Cain, which is a mechanic that was added later into the game. I think when the Crone Hellebron came out. If you obtain the sword, it gives you immense melee power, but it has debuffs to growth and public order and other things because you're a High Elf carrying around the Sword of Cain, and it probably doesn't have the best look. In any case, yeah. So that's the mechanics. They're mechanics in campaign, like if you're looking at Tyrion here, for example, they're a little bit lame compared to, let's say, the Ikka Claws, the Throts, the Eltharions, the Groms, all these others that have had more recent ones. But it's there. So I'll let you all kind of be the judge of that. I think it's a little bit weak, but I don't know. You added the Sword of Cain. Maybe it's enough to help carry. Let's go load Teclis and others and see how they compare. All right, so here we are with Teclis, and there's really nothing different with Teclis and Tyrion. They're the same, though I did forget to mention this espionage thing. High Elves can use the trade agreements to get visibility information on basically anybody they're trading with. It gives them visibility to their port settlements. So that is one last thing about the High Elves that's a little different. But with Teclis, intrigue at the court stays the same, so nothing different here. So let's take a look at Alarielle. All right, so here we are with Alarielle, and remember that Alarielle came out later as a DLC in the Queen and the Crone DLC and the update that followed. So she's not one of the original 2 lords that we saw with the High Elves. So here's her start at the Gaian Vale. She still maintains the influence mechanic that we saw earlier. However, we see something a little different here, which is Defender of Ulthuan. And this basically plays into the fact that as Ulthuan gets weakened, so does Alarielle, but as Ulthuan gets stronger and she's its queen, then she gains power, essentially, right? So it is a slightly different thing there. Right now you can see the Mortal World's Torment, average Chaos Corruption 0%, and that's what plays into these 2 mechanics. So you get the Defender of Ulthuan and then the Mortal World's Torment. See, like right here, we'll read it. It says, as chaos seeps in, Alarielle's strength and power weakens on the battlefield, only reducing and ultimately ridding the world of these armies of chaos will allow Alarielle to regain her former strength. And then, of course, the Defender really has to do with how well the High Elves are in control of Ulthuan. So if it's in control of High Elves, it's happier. You can see here that like the inner ring of Ulthuan's been breached. That's bad, right? So you got to clear out these Druki who have made it into the inner ring. So she does have unique abilities. Going to be different. You can see here too, power of nature. The Everqueen's power is that of nature itself. As her court passes from region to region, she brings great joy and reward to those who stand beside her, boosting the public order and reducing the spread of corruption for that period of time. This is where they introduced the Sword of Cain. So it came in here as well, so that's there. So Alarielle gets some different things, and then on top of that, she has some unique buildings and offerings in terms of recruitment. You can see that she can build this World Route entrance, and this gives her access to some Wood Elf units, which is really cool that she gets access to this. Makes her faction unique. So I'd say Alarielle is in a lot better shape mechanics-wise than Teclis and Tyrion. Let's keep moving along the list of lords here and see how they look. All right, and here we are with the Shadow King. So Alith Anar's campaign, he's got this start within Druki territory in Nagaron. He still has the influence, the same one that you're going to see with the other High Elves, but he has this marked for death mechanic, which is his kind of unique thing. Basically, it points out these guys like, hey, you go kill Nokrusith, which I guess is a Druki Sith Lord that I've been wondering about since this game. Zarian, Rakarth. If you kill these guys, you get rewards. And you can see like this, you get a whole bunch of influence. You pick up this Druki Slayer thing, that's pretty awesome. Minus 20% upkeep for all units and all armies. That is bonkers. Some of the rewards you get here, Stalk and Slay. Fear when fighting against Dark Elves. That's really sweet. And then, again, more upkeep drop. I mean, this is nuts, the kind of stuff you can get. So this is really cool for Alith Anar. It gives you a reason to use him to go and stalk out and destroy his enemies. That Sword of Cain is still here. So, again, something additional and something unique for Alith Anar. So, nice to see. And that makes 2 of the High Elf Lords so far that had something additional added, which, again, makes sense. They came in later into the development process. All right, now here we are with Eltharion and his start in Mortal Empires, which, like I said, is in the near the Western Badlands, surrounded by greenskins, which I guess is actually kind of where Eltharion likes to be, so that he can kill said greenskins. And basically, you get a defense level for Ivres, and its amount of defense has certain bonuses and buffs that come into play. So let's take a look at it. Athel Tamara in the Mist of Ivres. So essentially, you've got this right here, which is his prison. And you can rebuild the secret citadel, the prison at Athel Tamar, and you do it basically by capturing enemies, choosing whether to interrogate them, execute them, send them back. You can then run these upgrades that give you bonuses to certain things in your faction, or also unlock new units that are unique to Eltharion and campaign. Some of these are really cool hybrid bow units. There's some really cool stuff, like even flying melee units that they get access to. I think it's like some kind of griffin mounted knights, like really cool stuff you get with Eltharion. You can see here Sentinels, Starro, Knights of Torgaval, units that you can bring into the fold here, which are really awesome. So I really like that. So that's a unique add for him. And then this Tor of Rest defense level, you can see here, once you get into this defense level 1, and it tells you have to have X number of blessings, right, that you get. And that's kind of like the currency that fuels this. You get an army ability to summon the Sentinels. So it helps summon up a unit. And you can see there it says the explosion when it comes in, kind of tells you what they do. Then we get the Summon Sentinels and Oath of Replenishment, which is going to help replenish ammunition when it goes to level 2. And then at level 3, it's going to be even more benefits here. Oath of Replenishment gets upgraded. The Summon the Sentinels gets upgraded. And then the Mist spread to any outer region of Ulthuan owned by a defensive or military ally. So really cool stuff. The Mist basically makes it a lot harder for enemies to get into Ulthuan. And then you got Warden supplies here that you pick up, and you use those supplies, I believe, at Athel Tamara to run the upgrades. Yeah, so see there, we used our Warden supplies to make an upgrade. So again, something a little different that it adds for Eltharion. Nice changes again. At this point, he came with the the Warden and the Paunch DLC, I believe is what it was called. So again, this is later in the development phase, and so we do expect to see more, and indeed we get more. He's got this Warden's Cage ability that he uses in combat too. It's really cool. Basically, you can freeze the character in place and kill him, and if you wound him while it's active, that's how you end up putting them in your dungeon. So it makes it really fun to hunt down enemies at the end of each battle. So that's Eltharion. Let's go check out the last one. And finally, here we are with Imrik's start. Now, Imrik has these dragon encounters, and so this little thing up here at the top is counting down the number of turns. He still has the influence mechanic like all the other factions, but he also has this dragon encounters. At the end of that number of turns, a thing pops up and gives you an option to interact in a way, and if you decide to pursue one of these dragons, you go through a series of little quests and stuff, and then if you defeat that creature in battle, you have the option of recruiting it into your army. And it says right here, they're overcome by slumber, but a small number still roam the land. The Knights of Calador can call upon this in a time of need. So it's it may not seem like much. You're like, oh, he just gets this dragon thing. Oh, dude, they are powerful. These are not your average dragon. Like, dragons are already pretty strong, especially stuff like star dragons. But holy crap, no, these are some strong dragons that you can get a hold of in your army, and it makes him extremely fun to play. So that's his unique mechanic. So there you go, all 6 lords. 2 of them are a little more generic. That's Teclis and Tyrion, the original. And then the other 4 do have something unique about each faction. So that's a pretty good place to be in, all things considered, especially considering that the High Elves were a launch faction for Warhammer 2. So kind of expect to see a couple of theirs maybe a little bit behind. And who knows, maybe they'll get some stuff added over time in Game 3. It takes a lot longer to run through all the campaign mechanics in a Game 2 faction because most of them have a whole lot more going on there. So I don't want to cover every single unit individually like I've done maybe in the past. I know some people really like that where I get in and talk about it. I'll go through the roster, but there's a lot here. The High Elf roster was arguably a little bit thin up until fairly recently with their last update. The High Elves finally picked up some additional units in the roster, and I think most people would argue that it helped out a pretty great deal. And you can tell me what you think of the High Elf roster. Let's start off with infantry. Now, the High Elves are interesting in terms of infantry. They have everything, and I apologize if you hear some barking. It's my goofy dog in the background. You must see a cat or something. But we have spearmen, and the spearmen, and speaking of, right off the bat, before we get in any further with High Elf infantry or any High Elf unit, most of them have this martial prowess, which adds just a little bit of attack and a lot of defense as long as their hit points are above 50%. So keep in mind that whatever you see from High Elf units, it won't show up here on the unit card right now, but when their hit points are above 50% in the battle, they're going to be significantly stronger from a melee defense. So like, for instance, this unit's actually going to have 50 melee defense when it starts on the battlefield. So as long as the High Elves can keep their hit points up, they're much stronger earlier on in a fight. So it's just something to bear in mind with their faction. Spearmen are a great baseline infantry. They're going to have excellent defense and solid shields with a bit of anti-large. So a great first edition Rangers were added later on, and they provide the High Elves a nice, more aggressive unit at the lower tier. This unit is going to have a bonus versus infantry, and again, and it has a physical resistance too. So they're going to be better versus low armor. We got White Lions, which is kind of a controversial unit. This unit is really bad, in my opinion. Like, I don't know why they're not good, but they're not good. You have to pay extra for them because of this missile resistance, which some people seem to think makes it worth it, but they don't have a shield. I mean, and so they also lack a ton of melee defense without that shield, and so I really don't feel like this is worth it to me. That's really the only special thing they come with. They are, like, decent in melee, but at their price point, they hit kind of weak. I don't know if it's an attack animation, if it's their stats, or what it is, but I still feel like that White Lions, although there are a few niche situations where they are good, for the most part are a bad unit and kind of an awkward one, and I don't know how you really fix them, to be honest. Silver and Guard were added fairly late in the game. They're just a heavier version of the Spearmen, and they're quite potent. They even have magic resistance as well, so spells do a lot less damage to them. So if you're looking for a pick that's going to stand up longer against large targets, that's going to be the Silver and Guard. Sword Masters of Hoeth are really some of the best elite infantry in the game. Not the best, but among the best. They have great AP, great anti-infantry, a really solid unit overall, albeit expensive. And then the Phoenix Guard are in the same position. Very expensive, but this unit comes with physical resistance as well. And remember, these elite units can also sometimes come with martial mastery, which adds more melee attack. And it's odd that the Sword Masters don't come with martial mastery, but the Phoenix Guard do. So it gives them an additional 6 attack during that period of martial prowess whenever they have the mastery. Now, again, there's physical resistance on Phoenix Guard, which does help them a lot because they are unshielded. They need that type of thing. Very good anti-large unit. Anyway, that's their infantry. So pretty good offerings in terms of infantry and decent diversity there. Missile infantry is really where the High Elves stand out. Their archers have very long range, at 180 for the base unit here. Not a ton of missile strength, but you combine this with something like the Lure of Metal, where you can strip off armor. These archers are very dangerous, and they're quite good at skirmishing because of their range. They're almost always going to get first shots. There's an improved version of them that has slightly more armor here, with the archers with light armor. And then you get into the other interesting units here, which are Lothern Sea Guard. Lothern Sea Guard are one of the neatest hybrid units in the game, and in a campaign, you can really upgrade these guys a lot. And they become pretty stable units to hold up your flank while also being able to shoot. They have a spear they fight with in melee. Their range is reduced some to make up for the difference of them being a hybrid. And they really have pretty good stats, all things considered, especially when you kick in that martial prowess and they pick up that extra 12 melee defense and 2 attack. This shielded variant is really tough because then when they're skirmishing, they have the shield and it makes them have even more chance to, or have them that missile block chance, and it adds to their melee defense, which soars all the way to 52 whenever you have that martial prowess kicked in as well. So very cool units. I love having a ton of Sea Guard in armies sometimes whenever I'm playing High Elves. Then we come up with Shadow Warriors, which is a fun unit. And then, of course, there's Shadow Walkers if you pick Alith Anar's faction specifically. But the Shadow Walkers, I'll show them to you in just a second. The Shadow Warriors are going to have excellent range. They have a 360-degree firing arc, and they can fire whilst moving. So this makes them a really cool kite and a nuisance unit. And then at the top tier here, we've got the Sisters of Avalorn. Sisters are freaking awesome archers. 180 range, 25, and it's got good AP. And these ladies are no slouches in melee either. Again, especially when you add in that martial prowess. You put them in against some low armor targets after they've expended their ammunition, and they are pretty good. So Sisters of Avalorn are a really awesome archer unit. These ladies in numbers will absolutely melt anything on the battlefield, and it's pretty awesome to see. So that is the strength of the High Elves, is going to be their range. They have some very nice options at range, and let's go ahead and show you that one other one here too with Nagarite that you are missing, and that's the Shadow Walker unit. They have a poison melee attack and a poison missile attack, so it's really cool to mix these guys in with the Shadow Warriors, because their poison missile not only, I want to say, I always get this wrong, it hits the damage of an enemy, so they do less damage, and it slows down their speed. So it's really helpful in order to debuff enemies who are trying to chase you down. So pretty awesome unit there to add in. So let's jump back over here and keep covering the roster. Now, from a cavalry standpoint, the High Elves are in pretty good shape. They have, at the low end, Illyrian Reavers, which are probably an underappreciated unit. This is a very cheap shot cavalry unit, and it has a really decent charge. I mean, it's nothing to write home about in terms of armor, but their speed is good. And again, with martial prowess, the melee stats are decent. Because you're going to pick up 12 defense, which is going to make them much more survivable than they otherwise would be. These are great for hitting cheap targets and skirmishers, so Illyrian Reavers shouldn't be underestimated. Silver Helms come in with a lot more armor, and their melee defense is poor. However, again, martial prowess will improve that, but they get a massive charge bonus at 64. So this is a much improved version of Illyrian Reavers, and then you get the shielded variant, which picks up a little bit of a missile block chance, has more melee defense. So again, a little more survivable after the charge. And then there's some chariot units. We have the Aethelmar chariot and the Lion chariots of Trace. The Aethelmar chariot, it is a heavy chariot, I would say, because of its armor. It's not specifically AP, but it is good against infantry. And then the Lion chariot picks up that AP damage while losing a little bit of armor. But you'll do more damage, and it picks up the same kind of missile resistance that you see on White Lions, which honestly could be handy for a chariot unit. They're a rather large target. So probably more useful than it is for the White Lions, to be honest. Then we come into Dragon Princes, which have a very, very good charge bonus, excellent armor, and a shield. These are some hard-hitting heavy cavalry with physical resistance and massive fire resistance. So if there's anything coming with flaming damage, these guys are going to be good. Now remember, they come with martial mastery as well. So they're going to have extra attack tacked onto their numbers while they're at over 50% hit points. So pretty solid options from a cavalry standpoint too. I'd say the weakness here for the High Elves is that none of these are specifically anti-large or AP that aren't a chariot. Where you do get some benefit there is this Regiment of Renown, the Fireborn, which does bring in the bonus versus large. So that's a bit of the weakness, is they don't have that AP anti-large hitting power, but pretty good options at a pretty good price. And then we're going to come in with the Missile Cavalry, and Illyrian Reaver Archers basically maintain the melee statistics of their melee brethren, but also pick up a bow with 140 range. So really not bad at all, and a pretty useful unit. And then you have Tyrion Chariots. These units are actually kind of useful. They get underestimated sometimes. They're really good against infantry as a secondary. And their ammunition's really pretty decent over time against certain targets. So let's say you're fighting against a faction like Norska, for instance, that relies on a lot of monsters. If these units can stay ahead of Norska, they can skirmish pretty well from range and do a lot of damage, and then come in as a secondary role to hit infantry, which Norska is almost certainly bringing with them. So just as an example, Tyrion Chariots, a bit of a niche unit, but a fun one. Now let's move on to Monsters and Beasts. I said I wouldn't go through all these, and here I am doing it. I love you all, it's just that much. So Great Eagles. Great Eagles are a really nice piece of the roster for High Elves. They're very fast. They do a lot of weapon damage, and they're going to be really good in numbers. You get 2 or 3 of these things, and it's going to be big trouble for anybody. And it's because their melee attack's pretty high, and so is their weapon damage. Again, it's not specific AT, but then you tack on this charge bonus, and it means they're very likely to hit you, and they're very likely to hurt you. So I really like Eagles. They're a bit squishy, but a very fun unit. Then they added in War Lions later into the development, a cool monstrous cavalry, if you will, monstrous infantry, whatever you want to call it. And they do good AP anti-infantry work. They're a little bit squishy though, low on armor, so make sure you use them carefully. Phoenix units. Now I love Phoenix units. Let's talk through these. We're going to start with the Flamespire Phoenix. This thing has like 10 uses of the Wake of Fire, or in this case, Flaming Crap. So this is like a bird that flies over and craps on your card, except flaming, and it kills you. The Flamespire Phoenix has pretty good damage, and it's actually AP, unlike the Eagle. It has magic attacks and flame attacks, and then it has this cool ability where when it gets down under 10% hit points, it has the ability to basically regenerate, have a rebirth like a Phoenix is famous for. So it's really cool. Really neat ability and really fun unit. And then you get the Frostheart Phoenix, which is a higher damage version, but less attack. So it's not going to hit as much, but what it does, it hits harder. And it has this, it has the slowing aura about it. It's this blizzard aura, which debuffs enemy melee attack and damage when it's in their presence. So it's going to hit a little less often, hit a little harder, but it's going to debuff the units around it. It's more of a specialty unit in that regard. And let's go ahead and take a look at the Arcane Phoenix, which was added again later on. Now the Arcane Phoenix is kind of like a magic version. It's going to be akin to, like, it gets the damage, except a little better still than the Frostheart Phoenix, and it gets the attack of the Flamespire Phoenix, which was higher, but it also picks up some bound magic spells. You get this Vortex from Emberstorm, which means that this is a good blob buster. Very good blob busting unit, and it still maintains that rebirth that you get from the other one as well. So the fiery rebirth is there. So very cool units, Phoenix. And then the dragons. So the dragons, starting off with the Sun Dragon. Sun Dragon is the lowest tier dragon, comes with 460 weapon damage, and of course it's AP. It gets breath attacks. It's going to be mid-tier armor. Very powerful single entity, but a little bit less survivable because of its armor level. As we move up to the Moon Dragon, it maintains the same armor, but picks up considerably more melee power. And then when we move up to the Star Dragon, it gets a little more armor still, and a lot more melee power. And then the Star Dragon's breath attacks are very powerful. They're good against single entities, and they're good in blobs. So the Star Dragon is the single entity monster for the High Elves. It is an extremely powerful unit, and a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield, and one that you'll see many players show respect to whenever they come up against the High Elves. So that's their roster. In my opinion, High Elf roster's in a pretty good place, pretty solid overall, and it really needed some additions, and it finally got that laid in, and I feel like they're in a good spot. Heroes. Most of the heroes for the High Elves are going to be all about magic, and you're going to see that with a ton of different mages. You got heavens, you got shadows, you got beast, you got death, you got fire, you got metal, high, life, light, and the Lore Master of Hoeth, which is like a melee slash caster hero. So and he comes with a mix of spells, which is going to be a little bit of light, death, beast, or shadows and life. It's an odd mixture. You got light here with these two spells. We've got death here with Spirit Leech, shadows with Mystifying Miasma, beast with Wissen's Wild Form, and life. So it's an interesting kind of combination, and it's an AP anti-infantry unit. Doesn't have any mounts. But anyway, let's look at all the mages. The mages are really cool. They can be put on foot, on an elven steed, or on an Aethelmar chariot. And on an Aethelmar chariot, these are dangerous anti-infantry units, which a lot of people do like to use them in that respect. They're fast and they're hard to stop. And then with all these different options of magic, mages are an excellent pick for a hero in the High Elves. The Lore Master of Hoeth is a little more niche, but sometimes a fun pick. Definitely fun to use in campaign. And then as far as the others, you have a Noble. And the Noble's a really cool unit. On foot or on the steed, they're going to carry AP anti-large. So they have a very specific anti-large focus to help protect your army from large targets. And then if they go on the Eagle, they just do more damage, but without the anti-large or AP. And then if they go on the Aethelmar chariot, they pick up AP anti-infantry, which makes them extremely powerful anti-infantry tools. So Nobles are a very nice piece of the High Elf roster and are very powerful heroes. And then we come to the Handmaiden of the Everqueen. These were added with Alarielle. The Handmaiden is a sweet addition to the roster. AP, when she's on foot, maintains AP anti-large when she's on foot. Same on the Elven Steed, except she picks up all that speed. She does have a bow, and she can attack from range, and she's quite good at it. And her abilities buff the reload skill of nearby archer units, so she's really good to keep close to an archer line or like some Illyrian Reaver archers. So really cool. And then when you mount her on the Barded Aethelmar steed, that's where she picks up the most armor and kind of tankiness, but loses a little bit of speed. So I really like the Handmaiden as a hero as well. Some very nice options in the hero category for the High Elves. Now, let's talk about the lords. From a lord standpoint, the Princess and the Prince. The Princess has a ranged weapon. The Prince does not and is more melee focused. They have access to basically the same mounts, except you got Sun Dragon that comes on the Princes, and you have a Moon Dragon that comes on the Princess. So slightly different options there. And then of course, one is melee focused while the other is ranged focused. Then later in the game, they added all these archmages. We've got Beast, Death, Fire, Heavens, High, Life, Light, Metal, and Shadows. So you can pick a spellcaster generic lord, and with these, you have options of mounting them on Nothing, Elven Steed, a Aethelmar Chariot, Great Eagle, or a Moon Dragon, which is pretty cool with all those different options. I wanted to say one of them had a different dragon mount, but I could be wrong. Yeah, it looks like I was wrong. So in any case, that's the different mounts they can get, so really cool options. Nice to have, so a lot of generic options for the High Elves. And then there's our legendary lords. Let's talk about their melee, or their specialties, I should say, not their melee, but their specialties. Alith Anar is a ranged lord. He's going to buff other ranged units, and if you're looking for kind of a shoot and kite style gameplay, he's your man. Pretty fun. Weak in melee, as you would expect, great from range. Imrik is extremely solid in melee, so if you're looking for one of the strongest options in melee, on foot, he's AP anti-large, and the same on his Elven Steed. When you put him on his dragon here, Menathir, or however you say it, very powerful unit. And then he has special abilities here, the Star Lance, which makes him hit like a truck on the charge. So you'll want to stay away from that if he's charging. And then he's got this Dragon Horn, and the Lord of Dragons is a very good debuff. So Imrik is one of their premier melee lords for the High Elves. And then you got Tyrion, who is, as of the end state of the game, also very powerful in melee. He hits with AP damage, and he has these special abilities, Feint and Repose, and then he's got this other one, I think it's in his items here, yeah, the Heart of Avalorn. And basically, when he gets down below 20%, there's a good chance that he's going to pop up and get a ton of extra hit points. He is a pain in the butt to kill, very powerful. And if you look at him, I mean, this dude is a major duelist. He's got really high attack and really good melee defense, so another interesting melee pick. And then you got Alarielle, who's still one of the favorite picks, probably for the High Elves. Her healing is subpar to none. She carries the Lore of Life mixed with High and Light, so she has a really interesting mix of spells. Banishment is a good blob buster. He's got Earthblood and Shield of Thorns for healing and defense. And then Tempest here, which is great at controlling other flyers, and then Arcane Unforging, which is good against a single entity. But where Alarielle really gets her power here is in the Star of Avalorn. It's a 2-use massive healing. You can put 1,000 hit points back on to up to 3 allies within its circle. It's a very small circle, but this is very, very powerful, especially on like a Star Dragon or other key units. And then she's got the Stave of Avalorn, which is going to improve her recharge rates and basically make it impossible to miscast. And then her Shield Stone of Isha, which can add physical resistance to nearby allies. So very popular pick. She's usually seen mounted on her Eagle in multiplayer, but quite good in just about any state. Teclis has also become a very popular pick because he got this busted Arcane Phoenix mount, and all of a sudden Teclis is both good at melee and superbly good at magic. I don't know that he was ever supposed to be, but he is. And he was a pretty good lord as it was, just because of his spells. His spells gave him really good control over the battlefield with the Net of Amantok, Flock of Doom, Regrowth. I mean, he was very powerful in terms of healing. Plus, he has this Potion of Charoi, which also gives him even more healing, and a bound spell of Fiery Convocation, which is a wind spell. It's very powerful against lines. He was already and then he had the Sword of Teclis as well, which improves all of his recharge and power rates. So he's already an extremely good caster. And then when you put him on the Phoenix, he's just broken. And I mean, it's really fun if you're playing campaign. It's not so much fun if you're playing against him in multiplayer, but I mean, he is broken good on those mounts. Of course, he's absorbently expensive there as well. And then finally, we got Eltharion, who is a very nice hybrid lord. He's a mixture of melee and caster, and when you mount him on Stormwing, his Griffin, he's pretty good in the air. And then he comes with a high lore of magic here, which Apotheosis can be quite good at healing slowly over time, and then Arcane Unforging Tempest for controlling the air. So pretty fun unit all in all, but probably not one of the more popular picks for the High Elves at the moment. But there you go. That's the High Elf roster. I think they're in pretty good shape. I think the High Elves are ready for Game 3. I think I'd like to see a couple of improvements to Tyrion and Teclis in terms of campaign mechanics, just to give them something a little unique to match the others, but that can come over time. Not super worried about it right off the bat. They've got a great mixture of campaign starts, and then their roster. The roster is totally playable in multiplayer and in campaign. It's really solid. I think CA's done a good job. It took a long time to get these guys to their final state, but I think the state that the High Elves are in are quite good, and I think they're every bit ready for Game 3, and you all can share what you think at that point. But I really like the High Elves. They're a personal favorite faction of mine right next to the Dawi. I don't know why I like those two so much, but I just do. They're some of my favorite to play, and so I'm excited to see them in Game 3, to be able to take on all the hordes of chaos. I think it's going to be a good time. Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Get down in the comments. Tell me what you think. HeirofCarthage signing out for now. I'll see you all soon with some more State of the Faction videos.